Facing criticisms from several bodies like the African Union, the Congo-Rwandan tensions have taken yet another dimension. First, Congolese President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi, of course, accused Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, then later recalled the ambassador, and protests sparked in the eastern city of Bukavu, where they demonstrated for the discontent with the involvement of great powers such as the United States, Great Britain, and France. Earlier this week, the African Union called for an end of hostilities and restoration of peace between the two East African countries. Tensions have been particularly high between the two countries since the resurgence of in late 2021 of the M23 rebels, also known as the March 23 movement, a former Tutsi rebellion that took up arms, blaming Kinshasa for failing to respect agreement on the demobilization of its fighters. Could peace resurface in the East African region? Can these two countries come to a common ground with the M23 rebels? What is really the way out? We shall be finding answers in the course of today's edition. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome on board on this weekend edition of Voice It Over Your Pan-African channel for You Media Africa. Today we are discussing the Congo-Rwandan tensions with relation to the M23 rebels that have been affecting the country, and of course resurgence is attacks since late 2021. And as guest this afternoon, I'm joined by Dr. Asang Michael Kuma, who is a member of the Rwandan Bar Association as well as a member of the East African Law Society. Join us all the way from Rwanda. Good day to you, sir.
Good day, Madam Sharon, and good day to all our viewers.
Thank you immensely for taking out time of your busy schedule to join us on today's edition. In order to proceed, I'll first ask, ladies and gentlemen, that you take a listen to this report that was taken before the latest developments that are ongoing with regards to the Congo-Rwandan tensions in the eastern part of Africa. Listen to this report. When we come back, we shall get down to the conversation. Thousands of Congolese joined anti-Rwandan protests in the eastern city of Goma on Monday, denouncing Rwanda's alleged support of M23 rebels, as Kinshasa recalled his interim acting ambassador to Kigali in further souring of relations. Rwanda has denied Congo's long-standing accusation that it backs the M23, a Tutsi-led rebel group that had attacked Congolese forces near the Rwandan border since 2012. Tensions escalated last month after the group launched a new offensive in North Kivu province and captured the strategic town of Kiwanja on Saturday, prompting Congolese authorities to expel the Rwandan ambassador. Congolese Foreign Ministry went ahead on Monday recalling the interim charge d'affaires from Kigali and ordering its newly appointed ambassador to Rwanda not to register his credentials, it announced in a statement. In August, the United Nations experts said they had found solid evidence Rwanda had been interfering militarily in eastern Congo. Rwanda's government has disputed the UN findings. Ladies and gentlemen, have a listen to that report before the latest developments that kicked off there in the eastern part of Africa. I would like to ask you this afternoon, Dr. Asong, in the wake of these tensions between the two East African countries, do you think there is light at the end of the tunnel?
The situation in DRC and Rwanda, it's quite complex. It's quite a complex situation. Well, I always believe that as the Rwandan proverb goes, that to every problem there is always a solution at the side. So, responding directly to your question, I would say that there is light. There is always light, and there shall always be light. But now the question is: are we ready to seek for that light? Are we ready to be able to create the necessary mechanisms and activities that would lead us to the light. And that is where the question lies. And I think that that is what we are going to see in today with regards to the DRC-Rwanda tension. And I hope that through this conversation, we'll be able to understand the onset of this crisis and be able to seek appropriate solutions that will lead to stability and peace in the eastern provinces of Congo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asang. You made mention of how the crisis came about. Now, I'd like you to give a brief history to all our listeners and our televiewers about what actually happened before these tensions that's actually getting worsened by the day in the eastern part of Africa.
Thank you, Madam Jix, for that question. I would like to start by mentioning that the relationship between DRC and Rwanda did not start from today. The relationship between DRC and Rwanda started since from the pre-colonial times, when we had masses migrating from Uganda and Rwanda to the eastern provinces of Congo, specifically North Kivu and South Kivu. Later on, during the colonial periods, the Belgians, as we all know, were the colonial masters of the DRC and what we call today Rwanda, and also Burundi. And what they did is that when they were administering the regions in east of Congo, what they did is that those who were already in Congo, they considered them as indigenous people. And those who migrated from Uganda and Rwanda were being considered as non-indigenous people. So actually at this moment, we realize that the non-indigenous people who migrated from Rwanda and Uganda did not have the same rights as the Congolese who were already there. And this started leading to some sort of tensions at the time. So later on, when DRC had its independence in the late 50s, what happened there is that the migrated groups from Uganda and Rwanda formed what they call the Banya-Rwandan group. So they took part in elections and they were able to win some places in the municipality of the North Kivu province of Congo. But the authorities or the indigenous people of Congo had to put a block to this by limiting their access to different positions and to maybe lands and etc. And this led to what was called the Banya-Rwandan War in east of Congo. So, amidst of this crisis, there was a first law reform that had to do with citizenship, I think in 1970, in the 70s, which had to grant citizenship to all those who migrated from Uganda and most especially from Congo. So at this moment, tensions seemed to have subsided because those Rwandans who migrated from the pre-colonial periods were being granted citizenships and could have the same rights as the Congolese, the indigenous Congolese people already in the eastern provinces of Congo. But later on in the 80s, this same law was being repealed by the Congolese government, and which had to say that all those who could have the status of citizens of the Democratic Republic of Congo are those who had ancestors from the period of 1885. So conflicts started all over. And I think this is one of the reasons why, due to the poor governance of Mobutu Sese Seko, Joseph Kabila actually started up a rebellion, and he was being assisted probably by the Rwandans who were already discriminated and marginalized upon in the eastern provinces of Congo. And then Uganda and Rwanda aided him to take over. So when he took over, automatically one of the main issues he had to resolve was the issues of those who were being discriminated upon in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, who though had migrated from Uganda and Rwanda, were supposed to be considered as citizens because they were there even before Congo granted its independence. So I think that amidst of not respecting that, another group sprouted up, and that is why you realize that even when Joseph Kabila was in power, there were so many there were so many rebel groups that sprouted up against him. Now, admits that also, we also have to know that there was also a conflict in Rwanda, the genocide against the Tutsi that was being orchestrated by the Hutu group. Now, amidst the genocide, and when the forces of the RPF came from Uganda and actually were able to subdue the Hutu, about 1 million Hutu members fled to the DRC. So when they fled to the DRC, the Rwandans who were already in the DRC were already scared that no, what the Hutu people did to the Tutsis back in Rwanda, they will probably do the same. Yeah, it will resurface, they will do the same here. So automatically they started looking for means to protect themselves. And we have to know that this Hutu group that migrated to DRC Congo were mostly those who orchestrated the genocide. And we have the famous ex-Interahamwe group that were being notorious for the different genocide acts that were being perpetrated in Rwanda. They ran to the DRC. And at one point, even they fought alongside with the military of the Democratic Republic of Congo during those periods of rebellion. And at the same time, the other Rwandan group who was in the east and that were fighting for their rights that had to be in existence since pre-colonial periods were fighting on the other side. So many peace agreements were being reached. In 1999, we had the Lusaka Peace Agreement. In 2002, we had the Sun City, we had the Pretoria Agreement. And it led to an end of the rebellion and the conflict in 2003. So, but nevertheless, there was a specific, all the rebellion groups had to join what they call the Armed Forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So that was one of the solutions that were being portrayed in these peace agreements. But there was a group that refused to join. And this group was called the Congolese Democratic Rally, which we all know was made up of Rwandans, but the Rwandans we are talking of here are not Rwandans who came from the present Rwanda, but we are talking of Rwandans who were already in the DRC even before the pre-colonial times. And what was their fight? Their fight was for their rights to be restored, for the DRC to acknowledge them as citizens. So since they did not join, they left on and created the group that is known as the CNPD. That is Congrès National pour la Défense du Peuple. So they started fighting again, and in 2009 there was a Goma Peace Agreement that was being established on the 23rd of March 2009. So in this peace agreement, the government of the DRC and the CNDP, called le Congrès National pour la Défense du Peuple, had to reach an agreement where the CNDP had to dissolve its status as a military and political group to become only a political group. Admits that there were also dispositions that had to regulate amnesty, because we know during the war there was violence, there were some crimes that were being perpetrated, so automatically amnesty had to be granted to some of the leaders in the sake of peace. We have to understand that according to international law and UN principles, there is a principle of what they call trading justice for peace. So for peace, they can give away justice so that things can come back to normal. Moreover, all the group members that were armed and police forces of the CNDP had to join the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Moreover, there were other issues like concerning administration of land, economy, how the natural resources were supposed to be distributed. And this Goma agreement that was being established in March 23, 2009 had so many other dispositions which were very important in the resolution of the conflict. But now, later on in 2012, what was realized was that the Democratic Republic of Congo, the government, did not respect the agreement that was being made in Goma in 2009. It's worth mentioning that this agreement had the participation of the UN, the African Union, African presidents, even the president of Kenya. They were seated on the table to take this agreement. And you know, international agreements work under the principle of pacta sunt servanda, which means they must be respected. But the government of the DRC did not respect this agreement. And that's what led now to the resurgence of the group we call the M23. So the M23 meaning Mouvement de Mars 23. So which is directly pointing towards the Goma agreement, peace agreement that was made on the 23rd of March 2009. So nevertheless, they fought in 2012 and they were being defeated. There was also another peace agreement that was to establish peace. But we know the issue that we're always having with our peace agreements is that we don't want to actively include the rebels, and more to that, the different states don't respect them. So automatically it did not really lead to peace in the region, and that is why we have the resurgence again today. Moreover, it is worth stating that the Hutu group that fled to the DRC also created a new rebellious group called the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. So when they say Rwanda is intervening in the DRC, it's because this group actually is threatening the security of Rwanda, and once in a while they come into Rwanda and attack, and that is why the Rwandan forces have to chase them back, and sometimes they might have to even maybe cross borders. But nevertheless, if we stay specific on the issue that is today, we are talking about the M23 group, and the M23 group comes from the Goma Agreement of March 23, 2009. So that's a brief history of what we have today. And concerning the reports, of course, the UN will always have reports, but nevertheless, these reports also stated that it's not only the Rwandan forces that are assisting or allegations that Rwandan forces are assisting the M23, but that we also have the armed forces of the DRC who are also assisting the M23. And it's worth mentioning that most of those who are in the M23 were once part of the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2009. So you see, it's a very complex atmosphere, and I think to resolve this issue, we must make sure we understand history, understand the past, so that the past will make us have knowledge to understand the present and ameliorate the future.
Thank you so much for the brief history. I learned a lot from that, and I believe our televiewers and listeners as well. Now, you mentioned the aspect of rebels not always being involved actively when it comes to peace talks, so to say. Now, how could we coin this with most active, or say most conflicts that are ongoing on the African continent?
Yes, it's really rather unfortunate, Sharon, that most of our dispute resolution mechanisms in Africa don't include the rebels. And I think if you look at it keenly, you will realize that we have most of these situations in French-speaking countries. You see, countries that have had a colonial background linked with France. And what we have to know is that most of our leaders, the idea or the principle about leadership, according to most of our leaders, is dictatorship, is authoritative regime, which therefore means that the leaders feel that they have the supreme power and everyone is supposed to respect what they are saying. If not, they are going to crush them. Unfortunately, violence have not proven to be the best way in dispute resolutions. And when it concerns political issues, violence have shown never to be an effective method. So what I want to say is that I think it's a call on most of our African presidents and most of our leaders to bear in mind that amidst conflicts, the best way for them to be resolved is through dialogue. And we know dialogue and mediation or negotiations are being provided by the UN Charter of 1945 in Article 33, which actually encourages mediation for dispute resolutions regarding conflicts and for peace settlements. So our leaders will have to look into this direction, and actually even taking the example of the Tigray talk that took place in South Africa a few days ago with regard to the Tigray conflict in Ethiopia, where you have the Ethiopian government and you have the Tigray rebels sitting on the table. And due to that type of mediation, we see today that there was the possibility to have a ceasefire in the Tigray region, federal region in Ethiopia. So it is quite important and it is necessary for our leaders to change strategy and to know that if they are going into any mediation, they must include the rebels. Because when we look at the present tensions in the eastern provinces of Congo, I think in the month of June, there was a peace talk that was being organized in Kenya. But surprisingly, the rebels were not there. So how do you want to resolve a problem when the actors are not on the table? Because these rebel leaders, they have a reason why they are fighting. And unless we understand the reason why they are fighting, then we will not be able to resolve the problem. But concerning the M23, we already have an idea, because the name of the group is directly linked to the 23rd of March Goma agreement. So we know that it is linked to that particular agreement. But nevertheless, we need them on the table to be able to discuss better, to understand them, to dialogue, and at the end of the day, to produce peace in that region that will stop all the different violations of human rights that have been taking place since a few months ago.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asong. Now we've been having a blame game situation coming from all parties, especially from the Democratic Republic of Congo. First, the DRC's president, Felix Antoine Tshisekedi, he did accuse Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, and presently they are accusing Uganda yet of supporting these rebels. Now, what do you think should really be the way forward if they actually want to quell the tensions that are ongoing in the region?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, for that question. Actually, concerning the attitude of President Felix Tshisekedi, I think it is not the best and most appropriate method for him to use in the resolution of this dispute. As we have earlier on heard, and as I earlier on explained, the conflict in the eastern provinces of the DRC are multifactorial. I talked about the past colonization history. I also talked about other issues concerning Rwandans' citizenship. But there's something I forgot to also mention, is the fact that there are national companies and multinational companies that are also sponsoring these rebellious groups. Why? Because these companies know that in the eastern provinces of Congo, there are a lot of resources. And each time they will have to negotiate with the government to extract these resources, it will cost them more. So having a contract with the government to exploit natural resources in a region will be more expensive than having the same contract with rebels, you see. So at this point, they will find it more interesting to sponsor the rebels, so that the rebels take certain zones which are rich in natural resources. Then they will negotiate with the rebels, and it will obviously be cheaper. So there are so many factors that come into play. And for the President Felix Tshisekedi to point at Rwanda, well, the facts have not been established and have not been well verified.
But nevertheless, even if Rwanda were to sponsor, then Rwanda would just be a 1 out of 10 of all the causes. You understand? So I'm telling Rwanda that they are sponsoring the M23 and that they should stop sponsoring the M23. If at all Rwanda was sponsoring the M23, does not mean that the national companies and multinational will stop assisting the M23. Does not mean that the M23 people themselves will stop fighting and don't have different sources of to get their arms and the rest. Considering the fact that even the UN reports are clearly stating that even members of the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo are also assisting the M23. So when we look at it, we realize that it's all an issue about interest. People have their personal interests, and automatically, to resolve the problem, I think the president of Congo had to look into all the different factors and eliminate them one after the other, instead of pointing at Rwanda. And also knowing that one of the problem or the main causes of this issue is the fact that there was poor governance in the DRC that did not want to grant the rights to those Rwandans who migrated from Rwanda and Uganda before even pre-colonial period. So when you look at all these things, I think that the President Felix Tshisekedi, is doing some sort of victim blaming, where he has even a role to play in what is happening, because there was an agreement in March 23, 2009, and the DRC government did not respect it. So I think that actually pointing fingers directly at Rwanda is not what he should have done, and it's not the best way to go about it. I think the best way is to go through mediation, to go through negotiations, which the DRC did in 2009. So if they were able to sit with rebels in 2009, it therefore means that they can also sit with the rebels in 2022. So I think what he has to do is to call on the East African Society, to call on the African Union, to organize a good peace treaty, to organize a talk that all the members will be on board, including the M23 group. Because if they are not there, then actually we are actually walking on no ground. And of course, every decision that will be taken will have no effect. That is why they must be there to explain why they are still fighting and give their reasons. And from there, by understanding them, the different actors and the different parties might now seek for solutions that are going to resolve the problem and bring peace in the region.
Just to reiterate that the United Nations conference, that was the 77th edition, of course, the Rwandan President Paul Kagame stated that, of course, Rwanda is not supporting the M23 rebels. Now you're in Rwanda. How do you think the East African nation is responding to all these accusations coming from all fronts as we speak?
Well, actually in Rwanda, things seem to be calm because, first of all, Rwandans say they have no problem with the DRC. And I also strongly agree with them that the problems are situated elsewhere. Now, regarding the East African community as a whole, the different actors have had more of some sort of neutral attitude and silence, except Kenya, who through implication, implicitly, seem to strive for some sort of resolution that will go through violence. And that's why the president of Kenya, President William, had to deploy or has ordered the deployment of Kenyan military to that region to fight against the M23. So with regards to the East African community, I think that Kenya has had a very great role to play, and Kenya has been playing this role since the 2000s, when all these conflicts were going on, the different agreements, Goma and all the like, and even in the recent peace talk, it was being held in Kenya. So Kenya has a very big role to play, and they are one of the leading economies and one of the greatest countries in the East African community, and they see it upon themselves to play that role as a big brother. But I think that President William of Kenya is making an error, and considering the fact that a few days ago the former president of Kenya, Kenyatta, was actually one of the mediators in the Ethiopian Tigray peace talk. I think that he should have followed the example of his predecessor, in the sense that he would have organized or he would have proposed another peace talk in Kenya that is going to implement actively the M23 group, which he never did or was not done in June. Unfortunately, in June, he was not yet the president. But I think that what he could do now was not to deploy military groups to the eastern provinces of Congo to fight the M23, because we know that violence have never resolved any issue. I think what he would have done is to call for another peace talk, due to the fact that he has taken power, and this time around implement actively the M23 group. So that's what I have to say with regards to the position the East African community is taking, and with regards to what the Kenyan president has taken as a measure to resolve the issue, which I think is appropriate.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asong. Now you made mention of the East African community. We just want to recall that some time ago, the Democratic Republic of Congo joined the East African community. Now, given that the country has a vast market, a lot of population and so on, now looking at the economy, now we are moving from diplomatic relations to economy. How does these tensions affect the economy of the region?
Well, as a matter of fact, in general, conflicts always have an impact on the economy, because we know that for an economy to grow, we need to export and import, and there must be some sort of exchange between the different countries that are being involved. And we know that getting access to Congo, that means the access to Congo is being with the other East African countries such as Kenya and Tanzania, which are the leading economies in the East African community, goes through Rwanda. You see, Rwanda has one of the easiest routes to get to DRC, and we also have Uganda, which has borders with the DRC, and I think Burundi. But now, with these tensions, things will be a little bit complicated, in the sense that it will be difficult for goods to move from one country to the other, maybe from DRC to the other East African states, and from the other East African states to the DRC. So automatically this is going to impact commerce as a whole in the East African community, and for DRC who just joined. And we have to know that the issue right now is more between DRC, Uganda and Rwanda, and not really with the others. So the others don't really have a problem with Rwanda and Uganda, so it means that trade between them will be easier. But due to the fact that the DRC is trying to look for some sort of aggressive method to resolve this problem, will not actually make things easier for them. I think that the fact that they joined the community was due to the fact that they saw the prosperity of the East African states, and the East African states, the way they are being governed and the way they are being organized. And knowing fully well that Rwanda has a great role to play in the community, in the sense that it is also a very rising economy, with a lot of investors coming to invest in Rwanda. So the DRC could benefit from that, in the sense that there are different goods or minerals that could come from the DRC, and they might be bought from different enterprises that are being stationed in Kigali or in Rwanda. But due to the tensions, this will automatically make economic transactions difficult. And that is why the DRC is supposed to use a different method to resolve this issue. If not, at the end of the day, its presence in the East African community would not be beneficial to itself. Yeah.
Okay, away from the East African community, now let's focus on the African Union. We just want to recall that a while ago, the African Union, earlier this week, had called for an end to the tensions between the two East African countries. Now, what role can the African Union play in such a scenario?
Well, the African Union has that main role to keep all African states in unity and to actually work for development, peace, and democracy in the union, in the continent, and actually encouraging the respect of international law, especially human rights, and to be able to foster different cooperations between the African states and the world. Now, the African Union, due to all of these roles which it has to play in Africa, has that primary role to call on African presidents to be able to resolve their issues in a diplomatic way. And as for example, we know that the talk in Ethiopia regarding to the Tigray conflict was being organized by the African Union. So this is a very important role which the African Union has to play. And it's good that they started by actually reprimanding and actually advising and encouraging the presidents of DRC and Rwanda and to seek for peace in the region. But the issue is that I think that the African Union also have an issue. I think all the leaders have an issue in understanding what is really going on in DRC, because they give the impression that the problem is between DRC and Rwanda, with Uganda being a partner to Rwanda. But I, for one, I think that the problem is more on the group of people who are in Rwanda called the M23. So calling on these presidents to seek peace is like they are not acknowledging the presence of the M23 group. So for them, yeah, the M23 group means nothing to them, and that is very dangerous. Those are things that rebels don't like. On a general note, if you realize when you look at all the terrorist attacks that takes place in the world, the rebels do their best that they should be acknowledged. There are times when an accident or an incident may take place, they are not even the one. They will just get up and say that no, they are the ones that are orchestrated. So
they should actually seek the example of what is happening in Ethiopia, what the peace talks that took place in South Africa.
Exactly. So that is what they have to do. They have to acknowledge the presence of the M23 and they have to tell the DRC to negotiate with the M23. This has nothing to do with Rwanda or Uganda. The two active parties here or actors are the government of the DRC and the M23. Rwanda and Uganda should be left out of
external factors.
Yes, when they will sit on the table, the DRC and the M23. If the M23 decides to call Rwanda, that Rwanda has been aiding them, okay, then we'll bring in Rwanda or we'll bring in Uganda. But for now, the two active parties are the government of DRC and M23, considering the fact that these two groups had an agreement on March 23rd, 2009. So I think the African Union will have to be specific in managing this thing and recognize the presence of the M23 and that the issue is between the M23 and the DRC. I think all other external factors can come on the table depending on if the parties decide to call them in or not.
Okay, it's been less than 24 hours since the inhabitants in the eastern part of Bukavu actually went down to the streets to condemn their discontent or to protest for their discontent against the involvement of Western powers, great powers like Britain, France and the United States when it comes to the resolution of their conflicts. Now, how do you relate this to other conflicts on the African continent? How do you think the continent can actually resolve its conflict without the involvement of Western powers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there was a very powerful statement that was being made by His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, who was one of the mediators, the main mediators at the Tigray talks in South Africa. He said, African solutions for African problems. So it's time for Africans to realize that we can resolve our own issues, and that for our own problems, we have African solutions. And that is why he has to be applauded for the talk that took place in South Africa, and considering the fact that it was an African and the African Union that led to this peace agreement between the government of Ethiopia, the federal government of Ethiopia, and the federal state of Tigray. So this is a very good move, and it's important for our African youth to realize that, and our leaders to realize that we can resolve our own issues. We don't need to wait all the time for external factors or for other governments to push us to resolve our own issues, considering the fact that they themselves are in one way or the other the causes of the problems we have today. Even going back to the repartitioning of African states, you realize that all this, most of the hills that are in the eastern provinces of Congo have Rwandan names. So you see that might be a part that was supposed to have been considered Rwanda was being wrongly partitioned and sent to the DRC. So they themselves, in one way or the other, played a role in the disorder that we are having today in Africa. You see tribes found in different countries, like you see the Yoruba people in Togo speaking completely French, and their brothers in Nigeria speaking English, but they have the same cultures. So these are things that have to be considered while resolving issues. It's true that we cannot turn back time, but they must be considered. So it's for our African youths, before going out on the streets to actually protest, they must go back to history, because I think there is a lot of manipulation when it regards resolving conflicts in Africa. You realize that when we want to resolve conflicts in Africa, we just only consider facts that are related to the last decades. But unfortunately, we cannot consider only that. We have to go back to history. And as I earlier on said, Rwandans had already migrated from Rwanda and Ugandans to the eastern provinces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, even before pre-colonial, during pre-colonial times. It's just to let us know that if the youths today don't understand the history, they will say that they are Rwandans who are fighting. No, these Rwandans were already there since, though originally from Rwanda, and maybe from Tutsi or Hutu tribes, but they migrated before independence, so they have a right to citizenship. You understand? Yes. And more to that, if you even look at the genocide that took place in Rwanda, it was also being orchestrated, or had one of the main factors, the division that was put in place by colonial masters. So we have to sit down and really look at this issue and really go back to the past, understand the past, before going on to the streets and actually protesting. I think that the youth in the Goma should go back to history, understand the history, and from there they will understand that those who are claiming to be the M23, saying that the M23 resemble Rwandans, they speak in Rwanda, but if you go back to history, they'll tell you that Rwandans were there since even before colonial times. So I'm looking at all these things. For us to resolve our issues, we need knowledge, and sometimes ignorance is what is hindering us from going forward.
Exactly. The only way forward is unity. The only way out of all this crisis that is plaguing Africa is unity. Just to recall that all of us have the same roots. Now you are a member of the Rwandan Bar Association and a member of the East African Law Society. Now, as a legal expert, what do you think, or how legally can justice prevail in all these tensions that are affecting the East African region?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there has been a lot of human rights violations in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the Eastern regions. And what I have to say concerning justice is that those who have perpetrated all these crimes and violence must be held accountable, whether it be the M23 rebels or the different armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because we know that when there is a war, automatically human rights violations will never come from one side. They will obviously come from both sides. So the first way to justice is that peace must come in the region. And for peace to come in the region, we must first of all have all these parties sit down and talk. To first of all start by ceasing fire, so that all those who have migrated, all the different violations of human rights will cease. Because as long as the war continues, we'll have more violations, and this will lead to more injustice. So the first move is first of all bringing peace. That will be the first step to justice. Because if peace is being granted or being accorded to the region, then automatically all these violations that will increase the injustice in the regions is going to stop. So moreover, now they will have to look into the situation and to see those who actually violated humanitarian laws, violated international laws, and the laws with regards to war crimes. And from there, they will have to be prosecuted, because we know that during wars, there are certain things which are being permitted and there are others which are not being permitted. For example, if there are two armed groups, they have to respect civilians. They have to respect institutions like religious buildings and the rest. They have to respect zones for medical care and the rest. And those who violate all these different principles that are being portrayed in the different international laws having to do with those of war crimes, the Genocide Convention, and the rest, automatically they will have to be prosecuted by the state that is being concerned, or they can be brought before the International Criminal Tribunal to be prosecuted. But as a matter of fact, the issue here is that due to the complexity of the situation, everybody is trying to blame the other. And at the end of the day, in such a situation, the UN has put in place a mechanism for mediation, and which is also based on the principle of trading justice for peace. So in that sense, instead of going and actually punishing all the perpetrators, they will say, okay, this has already happened, and the best thing we can seek now is peace, and they grant amnesty to certain leaders. But this principle does not apply in all cases. When there are violations of international crimes, which I will name, genocides, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes of humanity, automatically this principle of trading justice for peace cannot be applied. So I think the first way of going about this is, as I earlier said, first of all, a negotiation for peace to reign. Then from there, they can look for all those perpetrators who violated international laws, specifically the Genocide Convention and the Geneva Conventions with regards to war crimes.
Okay, dialogue, very important. African solutions to African problems. Before we wrap up today's edition, the last question: what message could you give out to African leaders?
The message I will give to all African leaders is that most of the issues we are having today in Africa is because of poor governance. They have to make sure that they govern the people with a strict respect of the different principles that are being enshrined in international laws and also national laws, and that they respect the Constitution, they respect all national laws, they respect all the different agreements which are being placed forth by different groups or by mediations that had earlier on taken place. And the issues we have today is because most of these agreements are not respected. You see, the Goma agreement was not respected. In Cameroon, the Southern Cameroon's agreement with La République du Cameroon was not respected. And you see, it goes on and goes on, and today we are having a lot of conflict. So it starts by respecting the rule of law, by governing well, and that they have to listen to the rebel groups, and that if there is a conflict, they all have to sit on the table. Nobody is greater than the other. According to Article 1
of the Declaration of Human Rights, we all owe each other a duty. We all are supposed to be respected, and in that case, it will be easier for us to resolve all our disputes and conflicts in Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asong Michael Kuma, who is a member of the Rwandan Bar as well as a member of the East African Law Society. Thank you immensely for taking our time to join us on today's edition.
Thank you, and thank you to all our viewers.
Thank you immensely. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel for you Media Africa. I have been Jakes Nabrise for presentation. Today we were discussing the Congo-Rwandan tensions and seeing the way out towards all these in the East African community or East African region. Ladies and gentlemen, Umboto is the message I'll be giving you this evening. Have a great day in company of our programs.